deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say I'm reawakening minds.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, and awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, I am pleased to present to you our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, as he presents Olmec, Amexem, Yucatan and Yacub. But before he begins, please be sure to like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe to our channel. Now, let's receive Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey.
Islam. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, body makum. We're going to talk a little bit about what is known as Central Ancient Amexem, also known as Central Ancient Africa, also known as the land of the Olmec, or Old Amexem peoples of the land. One of the reasons we're having this discussion, and it's a loose discussion because most of you have a background in, particularly those who have been sharing with us for years, and those who have adeptus scholarship are well aware of the hybrid experiments that took place in the Yucatan, and many of you are aware of Dr. Yacub. Now, a lot of times when people talk about Dr. Yacub, and that's from the Moabite Empire. And keep in mind, the great Moabite Empire superseded, preceded the Moorish Empire. And that is the same peoples dealing with the Matriarchy when they refer to as the woman or the women who rule. And also, you refer to them loosely in different ancient texts as the Amazonian queens. Also, you'll hear that. And the takeover of the Amazonian queens, as a matter of fact, that has much to do with the blonde daughters who took over after the Germanic tribes began to populate Amrak or America. And most of their orders are pretty much patterned after existing orders. And this is one of the reasons why scholars who know the real history will refer to many of the orders that have been attributed to contemporary European colonial operations as Babylonian in their nature or origin, but dealing with dark side, or what you call the corrupted side. And the corrupted side more or less only indicates the de facto nature due to the fact of colonization. So when you're looking at colonization, you want to look at it not only from the perspective of alien peoples stealing or taking over lands and properties and estates of Aboriginal people. You look at it also with the advent of what they refer to loosely and not necessarily properly, but they refer to them as the Indexus Librorum Prohibitorum and Indexus Librorum Expurgatorius, loosely referred to as the Great Christian Book Burnings, i.e., the reconstructing of history, and also distorting the reality of the human pedigrees. And so when you look at more of your contemporary orders, as an example, like the Daughters of the American Revolution, and you see the DAR building completely of marble, including all the steps, located at District of Columbia. And then you see the brass plaque dealing with the takeover of the confederations of the Aboriginal tribes here, and becoming the contemporary order of the United States and of the Republic. And then you take in consideration the internal distortions and misprisions that took place later, and that became the corporate United States of America, more specifically and openly, February 2nd of 1871, which has much to do with the politics that we're dealing with today. However, what you recognize is many of the Aboriginal people, due to the operations of reconstructed history and this distortions, there's a mental disconnect or mental disassociation of our people to the land, which is part of colonial operations. And this is one of the reasons why we're having this discussion about Dr. Yacub. And also, give me the book over there, Negro Proper, the Nigger Industry. And I may have it over here, but just in case, if you have it over there. And many of you are aware, how many of you have, as an example, Oxford dictionaries of your earlier form, say pre-1960? And you'll find in the Oxford dictionary where the hybrid Europeans refer to themselves as heterogeneous hybrids. Look up the word hybrid and go into your Oxford dictionary. You will not find it in your later abridged dictionaries. You'll find it in your very early unabridged dictionaries, and particularly in Oxford dictionaries. And it would refer to the hybrid Europeans as Englishmen or Anglomen, and it will say, going down into your numerical entries at about 0.8, it will say, we Englishmen at best are but heterogeneous hybrids. Now, a heterogeneous hybrid is essentially two species, essentially genetically blended in order to create a hybrid. That's what a hybrid is. Heterogeneous means two different species, not necessarily as you look at, as people might assume on surface, two different necessarily nations, states, etc., in the concept that the people think now. So when you're talking about the Yacubian experiments that took place in the Yucatan, you're looking at not only a different time period, you're looking at, yes, you're looking at the fact that in the contemporary world, the people have been deceived relative to many of the hybrids having a Paleolithic skin, and this is where many of our Bantu, Mandinka, and Phoenicia tribes of the West would refer to them as paleface. But the paleface comes because the word pale actually is derivative from Paleolithic. And this deals with your essentially your Anthropopithecus species. Now, your Anthropopithecus species deals with what you hear Charles Darwin and other European naturalists who have been credited with with the controlled narrative of the human pedigrees, or what you would call the phenotypes, etc. And then you're going into Carlos Linnaeus, Blumenbach, etc. And knowing that those code systems have been adopted within the social, political, educational systems at North America, that the masses of the people are trained to look at these things as what they refer to as race among the human. When the real deal of it is that you're dealing with a heterogeneous species that has actually pretty much under colonial operations taken over not only the Maghreb, or what you call the North America, they've also taken over most of the nations of the world. And they would be referred to loosely. You would look for many of you who know a little bit of Berber culture, because most of the people have been groomed in the Berber culture via the Bible or Septuaginta. And so when you're looking at the Bible and Septuaginta, keep in mind that you are indeed looking at or dealing with different allegorical stories and also projections coming from Berber culture. Is really referred to Berber. That's what it's actually referred to. And so you're dealing with the Moabite, Canaanite, Hittite tribal families that are commonly referred to as the Asiatic Africans. And the experiments that took place in the Yucatan, most people look at, say, Dr. Yacub as a male figure by himself, but very few take in consideration that the predominant authorities during the Moabite reign, or the human family, is matriarchal. And so by most of the stories being told, people will credit Dr. Yacub, but they forget about the 13 Moabite scientist women. And even when you, for those of you who have done a little bit of research into the social structure operating at North America, and particularly in the more contemporary world, who know the real history, also know that roughly around 60 to 62% of all of your biggest, or what you call most strong, what they refer to as slaveholders, were actually women. That's another part of history that has not been told to the people. But that's something to give you thought on, as things have changed over the centuries, the perceptions that people have about the operations of social structure on the planet have been distorted. And this is another reason why we always remind our people, as they become more and more conscious of their pedigree, their bloodline, and their attachment to the land, Midgard, that they don't come into this knowledge or come into this information with an arrogant mind or an arrogant head, or put it this way. Some people, when they get more information on the human experience, they have a tendency to look at the great things that we've done and boast of the great things that we've done and pat themselves on the back, and then try to separate themselves mentally or politically from the negative things that we have done as a people. In other words, we've done great things and we've done not so great things. And in the process of healing humanity and starting to bring some more clarity to the human experience here at Midgard, a lot of the history that has been covered up by virtue of colonial operations must be exposed, so that everyone can begin to take responsibility for their participation in life itself. And everything that has occurred is not always to be looked at from a victim mentality, but more or less from a cause and effect mentality. Well, let's look at a little bit of the history of Yacub as an example. Knowledge is power. Being without knowledge is most detrimental to oneself. Wisdom is the creator herself. And those who despise wisdom and instruction are fools. You also find that in the Berber culture in the Bible, or Septuaginta, Proverbs 1.7. Now that would be altered into what is known as the Christian version of the Bible. And furthermore, one should aspire to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. That's Proverbs 1.2. Now, with these thoughts here in mind, that the history of the Moorish nation and all of its related subjects have not been taught. Keep this in mind, have not been taught since 1863. Now, those of you who know the political operations here at the Maghreb, Northgate, and many of you who may be Eastern Stars or Knights Templars or Kaiklos, known as the Ku Klux Klan, or Freemasons, or Odd Fellow, or Knights of Malta, etc., Knights of Columbus, etc., etc., Daughters of ISIS, Daughters of American Revolution, and all of your other multiple leveled secret societies are basically well aware why in their rituals and in many of their ceremonies, the majority of them will wear or would don what they would refer to in the orders as the crown of the sun, referred to as Tierra Sol. Tierra Sol meaning crown of the sun. In common language, it would be called the fez, F-E-Z, the Moorish national headdress. Now, when they wear the fez, symbolically, it is as a crown that they have conquered the people of the sun or people of Midgard Earth. The crown doesn't belong to them, but it is a symbol of conquest. So when you see many of your different orders wearing the Moorish fez in their secret societies, understand that it does not belong to them. It is a ritual for conquest, like a trophy. And for some of you who will take notes, say after we talk about this, start looking up and doing a little research, and you'll see many of the people who are praetors. Now, the praetors of Rome are referred to in common language as presidents. Keep this in mind. Presidents for the United States corporation operating on the land under the Doctrine of Discovery at North America, proper designation are praetor, P-R-E-A-T-O-R. They're presented to the common people as, quote unquote, president. So all of the presidents are Roman praetors, all right? Start looking up, say, as an example, even one of the most famous operatives to counter or to create the distorted or maintain the distortion or the distortion narrative for the people of the land here, who has a principal hand in operating what is known as COINTELPRO operations. J. Edgar Hoover, look him up, and then type up, say, J. Edgar Hoover with the Moorish fez, and you'll see he has a Moorish fez. Look up Ford. Look up any so-called president for the United States corporation, and put in there fez, all your political heads, and you'll find that whether you're dealing with people, as an example, even your so-called 14th Amendment propagators, known as civil rights appointed corporate appointed leaders who are famous for marching our people around and arguing race and prejudice in order to pacify our people, so that they're not aware of the doctrine of discovery, which is the real issue going on. Look up their names, and I won't have to name them. You know who they are. You've been trained from childhood that these are great, quote unquote, Negro leaders. They got fezzes too. And that goes whether they're just dealing with so-called civil rights, or whether they're dealing with your so-called major leaders in the churches or the mosque. They all have fezzes. So when you think, or when the propagation to the public is that any of these people, whether they're Asiatic Africans in North America playing the civil rights race argument game, they call it the race card, which is for mind control principles, because it's not what's going on, or you're dealing with any of your political heads that are telling you to vote for them, you'll find that secretly 90% of them have in their private life, not known to you, Moorish fez, while pretending they don't know who the Moors are. The Moors is a short term dealing with the Mandinka, Phoenicia, Bantu tribes of the planet. And when you think, as they've told you, only on the other side of the world, your concepts are absolutely wrong. And this is why people who know the real history know that the people here, or what you call the first peoples at the Maghreb, or what you would call Al-Iraq, i.e. the Western Hemisphere, etc., are essentially Phoenicians. And that's still to cover up or to, give a general term for all the Asiatic African tribes, because we peopled the planet, not just one side of the planet. The projection has been to make the people think that the people were static and pretty much stable just in small pockets, when in fact the empires of the ancient world bridged the entire planet, not just in what we would call Nubia, Sudan, Eritrea, although these are, or what you would call, the points of the grid that we deal with metrology, because remember, we lay out civilization on metrology, on what you call star charts. And because we look at the point of reference, or what you call the longitudinal and latitudinal lines, or the grid lines and the ley lines for the planet, we would look at on the other side that we refer to as Hikupta, Egypt, Eritrea, that area, as being the center, or at the point beneath the north, etc. And therefore, all consciousness for the position of the pole star, we would look at that point or that grid line on the planet, etc., as point origin or point ought. And so this is the reason why when you see in the rituals of life and recognition of life and the recognition of cosmology and the rituals of cosmology, which is the fundamentals of what you would call the cultures of the world, and those who know less of it just simply would call it religion, when the fact of the matter is most of the people on the planet don't get religion, they get dogma in the name of religion for control purposes. But true religion is based in, i.e. star charts, cosmology, astrology, and what you would call Hermetic law or maxim principles of law. And so when you're looking at people doing the rituals, you'll see them all face east, right in harmony with nature. Whereas when the sun rises, you'll see the plants and you'll see the trees, they will slightly bend eastward. And those who know a little bit about plant life and horticulture, etc., you'll recognize, even if you're, like, say, for instance, if you're traveling at night, right, or in the evening when the sun is not there. How would you find east? Study the plants, and particularly trees, and look where their major bend of the leaves are, and then look at, like say, if you see a tree, and trees, their trunks are generally round. But if you study particularly a lot of your little saplings, you'll see that the trunks are actually slightly ovoid. So you look at the point where you have your strength growth, etc., and that's where east will be. And this is why those in all Asiatic African rituals would always, when they pray or concentrate, they would pray east. And so they pray east towards what you call Egypt or Hikupta, or that line from Sudan, Nubia, etc., that whole line. And this is one of the reasons why when people are doing research on human family, that they always go to Egypt. What they're dealing with is Point Ought, and therefore everyone looks east, but those at Point Ought look north. And that's because you're dealing with cosmology. And that's part of the culture that is hidden from the people here, so they don't understand the navigations of the earth, or navigations or points of reference, or why certain things are done. And those of you who have been less corrupted by the Germanic tribes that have taken over most of the world are more aware of the fact that those of you in what they refer to as the East, and they would say Middle East, as if there's a West East and an East East, but that's the Point Ought. And so you're dealing directly north. So that would be the point of, from metrology, of what you call your pole star, etc., or your sun. And the sun seen, sun unseen. So all others point east, but at the center of Point Ought, you go north. And that's another part of culture that you're going to learn later, but I just wanted to point that out to you. And so it's very important from a political conquest perspective for the hybrid Europeans who have conquered the Western Hemisphere to keep real Asiatic African knowledge away from the people, particularly the people of the Maghreb or the people of the West, who are directly pedigreed to the very same people. You have just different tribes. And so, and the tribal, and keep in mind, much of the tribal is political, is more or less political designation, no different than if you're domiciling in different parts of the land, and we give different parts of the land nomenclatures or attributes, and we refer to them as names in order to deal with what we would call the abstractions of political jurisdictional lines. Not unlike whether you're dealing with a political organizational structure, which would be absolutely abstract, you would give it a name. And so that would be a personified but not living, and that would be called corporation, distinguished from that which is organic. And so when you're dealing with that, you're dealing with jurisdiction. And so when you're dealing with tribe, you're dealing with jurisdiction for the most part. Now, when you have different of the Mandinka, Bantu, and Phoenicia tribes, all from the north to the south, you generally refer to the former, or our forefathers of the Amexem side, as Old Amexem or Olmec, and they were referred to as Olmec. And now much of the culture that is here has been hidden by virtue of that 1863. And this is where the Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath has its force of operations in conjunction with the Indexus Librorum Prohibitorum and Indexus Librorum Expurgatorius, because they want to hide that history to mentally project the concept of disconnecting or disassociating the organic people of the land so that they could create or what you call the dead or the corporate political jurisdiction to make claim on the land. This is where you have the operations, particularly in political jurisdictions, of the doctrine of discovery. So when any of you might want to look up any law cases relative to rights of claim on the land, even related to the obligations of persons in positions of authority relative to Article 3, Section 1 and Section 2, with diversities, or even with people of the same states, people of different states, and people of foreign states, while the doctrine of discovery has been consistently used to supersede, in violation of law, to the Constitution in order for the hybrids to continue to claim the land. And therefore, from a political perspective, it has been expedient and important from a political perspective to continuously promote the narrative of the people of the Asiatic African tribes being brought to the West by hybrid Europeans in contemporary times since around the 1500s, all of which is false. And this is why, again, you will see, for the sake of them controlling what you call the Reconstruction narrative, why you see by training, they will attack anyone who begins to get conscious of their organic tie to the land. And as we talked about before in a few other of our sessions, to remind you again, those who know this information know why they attacked Ye and attacked Kyrie as soon as they started talking about, and this must be corrected too, Negroes to Hebrews. You need to know what that really means, because even what it says is not what it means, but they're on the path. Go ahead.
No, just telling you behind you. It's Hebrews to me.
Yes, when they refer to this, and you saw them started attacking Ye, most of you know him as Kanye. He said his Ye. And Kyrie Irving and others who knew but are pretty much silent. And as a matter of fact, years ago, one of the actors, Snipes, right? Wesley Snipes, when they attacked him, when he started enforcing their obligation to the treaties relative to no taxation, and then they literally economically try to crucify him, all the same thing. Now, keep in mind, as we talked to you before, Hebrew is derivative, and that's not proper. It's really Ibri, and it's something that these tribes did. It's not who they are in the sense of identity. It's the distinction, political, abstract distinction of the Phoenicia, Bantu, and Madinka tribes that crossed the river that essentially, in general, are referred to the Asiatic Africans of the Western Hemisphere. That's all that means. It's not about worship the way people think it is. It's not about them adopting the King James Version of the Bible and projecting ourselves to the world from that perspective. That's only what you would call a Berber story, which is the same people. So when you hear Berber, you're still talking about the Phoenicia tribes. Same thing. Stop. Get over yourselves. They're both Hamatite, because essentially it's all Cush. All Cushite, Hamatite, that's what it is. And I think because many of the scholars have adopted the Carlos Linnaeus mind control system that was adopted by the rulers or the Praetor operators for the U.S. corporation, that the pedigree realities have been suppressed, and the nom de guerre tags for corporate ownership has been promoted. Such tags are known as Negro, Black, Colored. Those are tags that are applied to the Cushite, Moabite peoples, i.e., of the Maghreb or the Western Hemisphere, by the hybrid Europeans to project or to give a foundation to the mental projection of separating the people mentally from the land, because the fact of the matter is, prior to the Germanic tribe operatives operating in the Western Hemisphere against the organic people of the land, those tags did not apply to humans whatsoever, not at all. And if you pay attention to another part of the narrative programming of the hybrids, they created the Bureau of Indian Affairs with the implied promise that the organic people of the land would be restored somewhat to their divine sovereign right to the land and the resources, and get us to agree to be Indians. And so the tag Indian also became applied to us of the Western Hemisphere. But if you notice that whenever they project these so-called powwows, which is a derivative of the Powhatani Confederation, mostly to the south, which you already know, Anansi Confederation to the north, Powhatani Confederation to the south, which includes all of the ancient peoples of the land, whether you're dealing with the Wachita, the Dugnamunye, you're talking about Anayaguya, all of the Mohawks to the north, Mohicans, etc. All of these are Moors. All collectively, they're all Moors. And now, when we're dealing with the political generalization of territories, then you will have your different territorial tribes, etc. And then again, the hybrid Europeans would bunch a lot of us together and then make up new names like Seminole, as an example, which they made that up. That's many of the different Bantu tribes.
Choctaw.
Huh? Choctaw means chocolate people. It's French. Choctaw means chocolate people. That's us, the chocolate people. But most of you scholars already know that. But these are derivatives or symptoms, social structure symptoms that evolved out of reconstructed history. And again, the reason why we're talking about Yacub is so you can have a clearer comprehension or understanding, understanding, and overstanding of the motives. See, because when you don't know motive or you don't know certain keys of reference, your concepts can be guided by those who are controlling the narrative. When you have some of the keys or restoration of reference points, etc., the narrative doesn't work. This is why so much effort has been put into suppressing this information. And this is why you always have pushback when people who have adeptus degrees, anyone who have adeptus degrees, begin to expose any of these truths about the real pedigrees of these people, they will be attacked. And on whatever level of influence they may have, it can be from what you call economic social attack, even to what you call murder and assassination. And much of that, as a reminder to many of you, has to do with a part of the story that's less talked about, but known in relationship to one you know as Il Malik. Now, Il Malik is commonly known as Malcolm X. He's another one that found out, and he paid with his life. But people will tell the story about inner operations of the Temple of Islam, later known as the Nation of Islam, and they will distort that a little bit. And I guarantee you that the brothers who have been jailed for decades for the assassination of Malcolm X did not assassinate Malcolm X. They were sacrificed. It really came from the hybrid Europeans, i.e. known as those three-letter agencies under COINTELPRO operations with the help of others under COINTELPRO operations and the gangs of New York known as police department. Go ahead.
So you realize that just recently, one of Malcolm X's daughters, they announced that they're suing or going against the, I don't know, was the state of New York, the city of New York, was the police department, others for being, because the two were found, they were exonerated, I think, or what, and they didn't do it after many years. But so because of what they have found out and because of the information that was withheld, now they have reason that, or have whatever, I don't know if it's stare decisis or what, but now they can at least go after them for being a part of coercing and creating creating what ended up in his death.
Well, most scholars already knew that from years ago that whole thing was a fraud.
Mhm.
But again, the hybrids control the narrative. Until recently, with internet, which was also used to suppress the people, it simply backfired, and people have been able to communicate more, even though they're still enforcing prohibitorum and expiratorius. Some information has gotten through, but I'm glad to hear that part. But that was not unknown.
I know.
It's just hasn't been what you call availed to the general public. And this is again much of what we're doing is really knowing that the energy or the projected vibrational energy that's necessary for the redemption of the people and their lost estate must come from the people themselves. And so this is why a lot of many of the things that we discuss here at the House of Reawakening Minds, we will discuss with the perspective or from the projection of encouraging the people to take responsibility, because people have been trained, to look for what they refer to as a sacrificial lamb. Figure if they get someone to sacrifice on the altar of their dogma systems, that therefore their problems will be solved, when actually the creative energies within themselves, or what they call the God gene in themselves, must be activated, because they are themselves are the cure. And I think by people not knowing the mental warfare and the psychic attacks that have been used for the last century or more on the people, this is why a lot of people get frustrated, Dr. G, and they'll say, why don't you, somebody else, give them a cure? And you understand? Why don't you do this or that for them? Because they don't yet know that it must come from themselves. And again, this is another reason we're talking about the Yacub experience, because the people need to understand the disconnect that the Peregrinus actually have to the land, and the absolute connection that the organic aboriginals actually have to the land, not only factually but politically, because that political disconnect is what keeps many of the people actually in that mental subjugation mentality.
So I found this, so you can, this has happened on, let's say, February 21st, 23rd, somewhere around that, the announcement, which was on the 58th anniversary of his assassination, that his daughter
assassination
plans to sue those 3-letter agencies. One start with C, one start with F, and the NYPD for allegedly concealing evidence related to the murder. Also, they also, some that you talk about the falsely accused. It says they are going to pay them $36 million.
Mm-hmm. Which is nothing for what they've done, for what they've suffered.
Right. So this just was announced like within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
The last week.
Interesting.
So like you said, they've known it.
They've
for years. But now I don't know what's changing.
Well, I think, Dr. G, what's changing is the fact that in spite of the pushback and in spite of the burden of being attacked, not appreciated, misrepresented, condemned, lied on, that people who have been telling the truth for years have really been the beating boards for a lot of people on both sides. One of the best ways, if you want to, kind of like almost live a miserable, solitary life and actually be held back on in a lot of ways, start telling the truth, because you will be attacked. I mean, talk.
I heard that discussed with regard to with Malcolm X, the fact that at the time of his assassination, he had already gone over and he had already changed his perspective on a lot of things yet. And so he was speaking the truth from a different.
Now remember what we've been telling people for many years. When Olmec made the Hajj, one of his experiences was, and this is synoptically, running into a French Muslim, blue-eyed French Muslim, who referred to him, which we talked about before, and many people who are closer to him will tell you about it, and people who know more or less the real some of his real personal history. Said, don't come over here with that black and white language, that's slave language. To you, Maghreb is evening salat. We know that because Muslims, salat is prayer. Evening prayer is Maghreb. But he said, Maghreb, you left the Maghreb. Maghreb is the Western Hemisphere, North America. You left home, brother. Don't come here with this. And logically, with a lot of people who have been groomed with the slave ship dispensation, which was totally false, and for the most part, totally, the sardine operations, rude awakening, and then of course, Malcolm having his experiences within the Temple of Allah, also known as Nation of Islam, had a lot of information, as many people do when they begin to, get back to their Berber culture, because Islam is still part of Berber culture. It's still Budan. And so the roots and a lot of the allegorical stories are still tied together. And once you start looking at the key points of reference in the Budan culture around the planet, you will see absolute connection. And logically, someone who has, I would say, some kind of self-awareness of trying to be credible or trying to be correct or trying to really help, who's basically in their heart of hearts not a sellout, like Malik was not, which is again why he didn't take the payoff, which is again why they eliminated him. He would probably be still here if he took the payoff, like a lot of your so-called black leader guys have done. Now, he set up two different organizations, and they also knew that eventually he was going to talk because he wouldn't take the payoff. And many of you scholars who don't talk publicly, because we already know certain things are not said publicly, that a certain number of finance was offered to Malik, not to continue in what he found out, including information he found out about different leaders, etc., including some things that have been derivative from Moorish divine and national movement, i.e. Noble Drew Ali, in connection with Temple of Allah, in connection with other information which has been held back, in connection with J. Edgar Hoover, in connection with many of your so-called praetors, etc., who also belong to secret societies who control a lot of the different so-called Negro organizations, etc. It becomes very discomforting when you begin to realize how thoroughly infiltrated any organization is that our people thought was there to help them. He didn't take the payoff. He paid with his life. That and remember, for many of you who are close to many of the people who are around Malik, remember his wife Betty had one time, and I know that many of you will back this up, said to him, why don't you take the payoff like everyone else? Because she was afraid. Because remember, they burned his house twice. They talk about they burned his house once, throwing firebombs. No, that wasn't the first time. Not only being shot at, etc. They were literally terrorizing them. So that whole family of our family have been enduring torture and unum sanctum attacks most of their lives, and particularly his daughters. And of course, later on, through some other operations that have to do with mind control and other things, Betty met her demise. And so we're not talking about that so much, but what we're presenting to you is this. Much of what the masses are continuously told about the history or the sojourn of these Moabites of the Maghreb has been totally distorted. And the very fact of what you see, as Dr. G was mentioning, with that suit. You notice how it has not been in what you call great public press, and it's like what you call snippet new information that's trickled out. This stuff was known for decades, but anyone talked about it was attacked, and so a lot of people went silent, and then because you were attacked even by your own people, who had what you call connections to different organizations, and they had what you call political skin in the game. Not necessarily that they were necessarily directly corrupt, but they had political skin in the game. And they're also trying to protect the images of different so-called leaders who they know in secret had Moorish fezzes while pretending not to know anything about who Moors are. And then when they did, they would distort it and tell these people that there was a religious group over here when it's actually all of these Asiatic African peoples with hair like lamb's wool, skin like burnished brass, i.e. of Moabite Canaanite descent, also known as Moabites, modernly known as Moors, also known as Indians of the West, or the indigenous people of the West. Those are tags that have been applied to all of the Bantu, Mandinka, and Phoenicia tribes. That's a fact from the north to the south of America, etc. And those of America, the organic people, are generally referred to as the Ibri or the Hebrew. In Hebrew's corruption, dialectical corruption of Ibri, which is a term, a phonetic term that simply means those who crossed over the river. It's a meaning, it's not a pedigree. However, yes, we are the Ibri. You got that right. Now, let's talk about the hybrid who has distorted this information or distorted the history, because we need to understand their motive. And this is, again, why a lot of people who really know the real history will tell you, as an example, like the great Egyptian adept. This was a title that was carried by one of the Asiatic African adepts. The great Egyptian adept, commonly referred to as Noble Drew Ali. He said to the Moabites of these Cushite tribes of the West, he said, when you get back in power, treat the European nice. I repeat, he said, when you get back in power, treat the European nice. When you know or begin to know the real Yacubian history of the Maghreb, you'll also comprehend when Drew Ali said, the Asiatic nation of North America needs to learn of their higher self and their lower self. And you also need to do what? Learn to love instead of hate. From a metaphysical counter move of psychic attacks, love is the medicine. And I know it's rough, but that's the truth. It's why all of the prophets and seers of the ancient Moabite, Hittite, Canaanite tribes always promoted social justice. They did not, and never have promoted conceptually what people have been promoting as quote unquote religion. None of the prophets, none of them ever promoted quote unquote what you know as contemporary religions. None of them ever. All of them were social reformers, every last one of them. And due to the fact that many of the modern contemporary scholars have always misrepresented the prophets, the people have looked at what they have been presenting to them incorrectly. And it has much to do also as to why people have, how do you say, not really learned the hermetic lessons of Yeshua or Jesus, or the what you would call lessons of the Nazarites, which are really Coptic, or Kupta, because Kupta is proper Egypt. And Egypt is not just that area that you see on your contemporary mappamundi of the modern world. Egypt extends from the east even unto the west, where the sun rises and where the sun sets. And therefore, the sun never rises and never sets on the Kupta Empire or the Egyptian Empire. Why? Because it spans the planet. Now, when the hybrid Germanic tribes of Europeans, and you want to talk specifically when they talk about, 1863, that's the Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath operations, particularly in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. The convention, even later on with the Whigamo Party, 1854, prior to that, why so much effort has been made to promote the reconstructed history. And as you all know, I don't have to go into that, why it was so necessary for them to establish institutions like the Smithsonian, etc., to cover up, why they would actually do what they would refer to as this was a cover-up. They would do what they call world fairs in order to cover up destroying ancient world architecture, buildings, tearing down mounds, covering up mounds, destroying inscriptions on mountains and stones, redirecting waterways to literally drown out certain town areas. A lot of the dams were built not for water control the way that people think. Many of them were literally built to bury or to force people out of land in order to build what they refer to as their new world. And so when you're looking at all of that and more, and we won't get into, all of those things about, what took place among the Aniyamwea or the Powhatani, etc., where they murdered many of us, because my grandmother is actually from that, from that area, what you call land of virgins, or what you call Virginia area, which are Aniyamwea, and they refer to many of the Bantu tribes and Mandinka tribes in that area as Cherokee, but that's Aniyamwea. Cherokee is just a cover-up. That's, so you hear the term Cherokee, Aniyamwea. So their major mission is to disconnect the people from the land. And so when you're looking at the Smithsonian, the World's Fairs they would have, like say a lot of the buildings were designed architecturally to also deal with the magnetic vibrations and forces of the earth. And if many of the buildings are hidden pictorially, and we're talking even surprisingly with many of you to the mid 1800s, you'll notice that many of the buildings had metal spires at the top of them, and most of them were the cupolas of the buildings were copper in harmony with Venus. And so when you have been told in your modern era that electricity operations, dealing with these buildings with the light systems, etc., that they were all gas lights and stuff like that, that's not true. Is that they were hiding and covering up the fact that houses were electrified for centuries. And that's a fact. That's a real truth. And so a lot of the buildings they would tear down, and then they would only or reconstruct things that or allow technology to be exposed that they could put a meter on. And so that's when you get into even some of these hybrids that you know about as Rockefeller and all them guys like that, and Carnegie and Rothschild, which is really a kind of a cover name, etc. And so this is also part of the suppression, not only of the ancient technologies, but of the organic peoples of the land. And they project that the organic people of the land were like we were just simply semi nomadic with teepee tents and stuff like that. When the reality of it is, a lot of your hybrids were tent people. A lot of our orders were both nomadic as well as stable cities, etc. We are a broad culture from the north to the south. This is why when you look in, like say, if you look at some of your ancient artifacts or ancient customs from Peru on up to Greenland, you'll see a commonality. Even in when you go around the world in your different nation states, etc., your contemporary nation states, and you look at a lot of the dance and the rituals, etc., they'll all be traced back to ancient Nubia. That's a fact. And so when you're talking Nubia, when you're saying Nubia, keep in mind you're talking from the Red Sea or Suf, because remember what they call the Red Sea is really Suf, S-U-F. So keep that in mind, many of you scholars. So when you talk about the parting of the Red Sea, parting of Suf, and you'll see that the Coptic culture of those with hair like lamb's wool are called Sufi. Sufi, those with the hair like lamb's wool. So when you're talking about people of Moabite blood, i.e., or the more ancient ones, commonly known, one of the ones who most people are aware of, his pseudonym is called Jesus. Now, he's Moabite. He's more too. He had hair like lamb's wool, skin like burnished brass, and of course, they would call the copper complexion. Now, the copper is Venus, and this is why many of the buildings were had copper cladding, etc. And keep in mind, when you deal with the blood and you deal with the energy, etc., this is why you'll find all of those elements even in the blood: copper, zinc, gold, etc. And they don't want, the hybrids don't want you to know that you people of the land are made up of the elements of the land, etc. And on the long term, it was necessary for the dark priesthood of the hybrids to do as much as they can using technology to change the vibrations all around you to try to affect nature in order to make the surface land of the land more habitable for themselves, etc. Because being Paleolithic in their organic hybridization, the general atmosphere of Midgard is not harmonic with their organic continuity. And so they have the problem of the sun trying to eliminate the mutant nature of the hybrid. And then you have the elements of the earth also not harmonic because there's no what you would call one of the key conductors of the energy, earth energy by nature, is called melanin. So the hybrids would take children and they would steal their stem cells to steal the melanin. For years, this is one of the reasons why they used to always sacrifice them. And they also, with their scientists, would make an imitation of the nature of the space suit melanin, and they call it melatonin. And they would use that in order for to calm the nervous system so they could even sleep, because the sun would attack the nervous system of the Paleolith because it had not the melanin to protect it from the UV rays and the other rays of the sun. These are certain fundamental on surface elemental realities that you can simply look at and recognize the disharmonious nature that many of the hybrids, have to suffer through. And even with some of the motivations, when you do the research of the Moors of the Yucatan, taking many of the hybrids to Patagonia, because that's where most of the hybriding experimentations were completed. And then they would take mostly males, though, to an island off what you call Turkere or Turkari. And Turkari is called now Turkey. And there's an island near Turkari, and near Turkari, an island is called Patmos. And that island of Patmos is where they took the first of the hybrids, and they used to refer to them as lepers, who had lesions on their skin, or what you would refer to today in modern terms as skin cancer. And they would take the leprechauns, or the leprechauns, and took them to the land of Angles in the Iberian Peninsula, just above the Iberian Peninsula area of the Amexem East. And that area is modernly called, in your contemporary world, Europe. And the area that they took most of them to remove from the closer or more away from the equator of the Maghreb area, which was damaging their skin, because they had with the hybridization, the heterogeneous hybridization, you have the sebaceous glands would be active, but they had no hair. And this is one of the reasons why many of the heterogeneous hybrids, if like say for instance with a light sweat or even with rain, you would smell, they would begin to smell from the sebaceous glands like a monkey or dog. And many people who don't understand about the Yacubian experiments recognize that, but don't know the origin of it. I'm telling you the origin of it.
So John in the Bible was exiled to the Isle of Patmos.
Well, yeah.
So would that maybe, because he was leprous, or he was
in hybrid European lore, they refer to as leprechauns. You get the story of the leprechaun and the arch, or the rainbow and the golden pot of gold type. All these are little stories to tell you about both the hybriding sojourn, or taken to the land of Angles, and they're called the land of Angles. Also, so keep this in mind, take point. The land of Angles, when the Moors ruled, was called Albion, Albion. And this is one of the reasons why the hybrids, or the Paleolithic heterogeneous hybrids, were referred to as albinos. And after the land, Albion. So Albion is now called England, or Englaland. Englaland. Englaland is Albion. That is given to the hybrids, heterogeneous, Paleolithic, Anthropopithecus heterogeneous hybrid, commonly known in the modern world as those with ruddy skin or Paleolithic skin, also referred to in your Bible, in the book of Genesis, around 27 in there, and they talk about Rebecca, because remember, it's an allegorical story, but it's really about the heterogeneous hybrid. It says she had two manner of people. Didn't say twins. It says two different nations, two different manner of people. And one was ruddy, and ruddy, or the red In
Roman.
yes, in Germanic linguistic form would be called Roth. And this is where you get Rothschild, which means red shield. So Rothschild is really an order of operations and not just a pedigree of family that most of the people think today is. So when you see the hybrid Europeans talking about the Rothschild family, they're talking about an order and not just one single family. That's true. And also why you'll see them when they use Aquila, and you'll see them put Aquila on the voucher systems of the Pope, and you'll see them put a shield with the trading stripes on the shield, and they'll put it on the breastplate of the bird, and then you'll have the bird with the cross with his claws, with arrows, 13 arrows, and olive leaves, etc. There's a lot about olive leaves that you're going to have to learn too, but that's not the conversation for tonight. It also has healing properties, but keep this in mind. But it also represents peace, and it also represents war. So that's war and peace. But keep in mind, Aquila is our bird too, particularly of the Maghreb. And this is another reason they choose the bird or the Aquila. And you know Aquila as the eagle. They call it the great, majestic Al-Moroccan eagle. That's a symbol. And they take that as a symbol of conquest. But they put the shield over a breast just to hide, or say the heart, but also imply conquest, etc. So that belongs to you too. And then they'll put the junta or the pyramid on the other side, which is the great seal of the Canaanite Moabite nation, i.e. the Ibri, etc. The symbol of civilization on earth. And then when you're dealing with the human social order philosophy of the Honesty confederations, etc., including the Powhatan of the South, etc., you'll hear the term isonomy. And isonomy means equal or balanced, harmonic with nature, rights of all humans. And this is where you get the nature of what you call the allodial right of life principle. And so when you look at the allodial life rights or balance in society, isonomy, this is where you get the nature of the allodial principles embodied in the Constitution, handed to the hybrid Europeans under peace to bring harmonic operations at the North, because they were very, 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 vandalous in their nature, operating here. The Paragonus, and so the Paragonus is a loose term given to the wandering aliens and wandering strangers, commonly referred to as the heterogeneous hybrids operating at the Maghreb or in the Western Hemisphere, i.e. known as colonials or colonists in general. And so it's again important for them to cover up the history. So let us continue so you'll have a little bit more knowledge of the Yacub, etc. Now, in relationship to some of these things, to give, we just talked loosely to give you some things to think about, to change your point of reference on how you're looking at the people here, particularly in North America, and how you are encouraged to perceive the political, economic, social structure. And then you will have some reference to have comprehension on why certain things are done negatively, why certain things are hidden, and why certain agendas, like eugenics, the most important part for the hybrids of contemporary times right now, it means ongoing, is that they've gotten to a point that they've pretty much successfully tore our families apart. So now they're on what they would call a kill shot. And what they refer to the kill shot in their Rex 84 and King Alfred operations is whereas they're putting men and women against each other to the degree that the men will start looking at the women of the Western Hemisphere as non-mateable and begin to abandon them, which would leave them open to abuse by the hybrid Europeans, because if they conquer the woman, they know they've completely conquered the nation. They're well on their way of operating there. So I'm telling you this so that you, as you see the signs, and they will be becoming more and more open and obvious, that you can use your greater mind to counter it and to do that which is necessary to start cleaning up the culture in order to rebond our families, etc., which is necessary for the salvation of the nation, on top of really knowing some of the real history. Again, while we're talking about the hybrid, i.e. the Yacubian experience, because you need to have an idea also of the motivations of the heterogeneous hybrids politically. So everything that they're doing is not necessarily, from their perspective, a negative thing per se, as some of it is, or a lot of it is from a survival perspective, if you get the point. Because they know the land is not theirs. They know they're not the real Ibri. So remember, part of the Unum Sanctum operations has been for the heterogeneous hybrids to pretend that they are the Ibri and that the people of the land are not the Ibri. Therefore, they can use their corporation platform to displace the organic people of the land and then claim both political jurisdiction as well as heritability or heirship claim on the land. This would be the operations of the Doctrine of Discovery. So those, we won't go into the Doctrine of Discovery at the moment, but again, as we mentioned to you before, this is why it's important for people here, people of the land, to be aware of the operations of the Doctrine of Discovery so they can comprehend why the politics, why certain communities are targeted certain ways, why the Pope's banks or the bench of the Pope. So when you talk about from the bench of the Pope, you're simply talking about the banking system. Keep this in mind. Put the word bank, write down bank, B-A-N-K. Then put in parentheses around it, bench of the Pope. So when you're saying bank, you're saying bench of the Pope. Are we clear? So the benches of the Pope, by virtue of enforcing, i.e. the Unum Sanctum and the Doctrine of Discovery, will logically use their voucher system to control or to construct the social caste structure. It's not personal, it's for the empire. However, logically, it affects many of us personally. This is why you'll see them redline certain targeted communities of Moabites under their property designation as quote unquote black community. When you hear the term black community, that means corporate state property zone. That would be, so you would have, so when you hear zone, you're talking political fenced jurisdiction. They're kind of loosely flexible. You don't see a fence, but it's there politically. And so the bench voucher system would be known as a Federal Reserve note. So the Federal Reserve note is really a voucher system of the bench of the popes. Therefore, it is controlled operatively by assigned members of the Roman Curia who would run the bench of the Pope, which would be known to the public as the bank. And so by virtue of the bank, they could determine who lives and who dies economically without being obvious, meaning like openly obvious, where someone comes and grabs you or physically takes things from you like this. They would do it by what you would call flexible adjustment of the fiat currency, which is an electrical system based on mechanical machinery, placed organically, placed from its organic form into an abstract form to control energy, and then falsely presented, because if it's accepted fungibility, remember, it's accepted fungibility as money. So it's necessary for them to project under the animal husbandry training in the minds of the people for generations that the bench of the Pope's voucher system to the Sister QV Trust is money. And once they got to that point, they knew that they could control the family. And they could use that to genocide the rest of the people out. All right, which they've been successfully doing. And so you will see them using another of the discovery tools known as the Pope's marriage certificates. They will use that to control the estates existing, and any future estates could be easily relegated from the bench. Therefore, all of the instrumentalities, which would be known as bottomry instruments, would have what you'll call a feudal fee attached to them, which would go to the bank, which would go to the bench of the Pope, etc. This is where your membership of the Curia comes in, etc. And over a period of time, this is how they could, what you call, make or break any targeted community without openly necessarily, although they would do it here and there, what you call firing what you call an open shot, like a cannon. When we're not talking canon law, though we're talking canon law, like a cannon gun type thing. And if you pay attention to the mechanics of its operation, you will see that essentially in your Rex 84 technical manual and King Alfred technical manual, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Now, keep in mind, while this is was originally targeted, originally designed in its nature, directed at people of Canaanite, Moabite, or descent of the Maghreb, or the organic people of land, loosely referred to as the quote-unquote Indians or indigenous people. They've been using the weaponry even against many of their own in your more contemporary times in order to create what you call an elite caste to maintain rulership or power, recognizing that many of their own, by necessity of the operations, would have to be sacrificed, and they would refer to that as collateral damage. And this, from a functional operation, this is where you see the members of the Curia have been sacrificing what they refer to in the political arena, social arena, as quote-unquote the middle class. So that's a political designation of them sacrificing the middle class so that the middle class would not aid in removing them from power. And so that's a part of what they call collateral damage in war. Well, let's get back to some more of their ancient origins so that you can see what's up. Now, with these thoughts, bear in mind that the history of the Moorish nation and all of its related subjects have not been taught, particularly at North America, but generally all over the world, but particularly at North America since 1863, particularly here in North America. Now, the history, the law, and the pedigree of the people have been eliminated from public libraries and eliminated from the curriculum of all institutions of higher learning, removed from the high schools, removed from colleges, removed from universities, and of the USA abroad. And many of you who've traveled here to North America, now you understand some of the briefing that you're getting. Many of you who come here, say from other particular different nation states, and they used to give people conversations, or they would have to vet them on what they call Ellis Island. And because things are more loose today, they will vet them, and they will have them come to your different immigration agencies, and they will show them videos. And one of the focus of many of the videos will be always negative of the people of the land. Now, again, that's necessary for the psychic attacks, for them to maintain the obvious suppression and abuse of the people of the land, who are not to know that they're the people. Keep this in mind. They are not to know that they're the people of the land. Keep this in mind. However, they're key to the economic system of the corporate de facto USA operations of the bench of the Pope. But that part of the operation is not to be known by the people of the land. And this is why many of you who come to the Maghreb via immigration are shown certain videos that may surprise you, that give a negative reflection of the people with hair like lamb's wool, skin like burnished brass, etc., and why you're instructed not to have conversations with the people of the land in relationship to their heirship to the land, lest you be deported. Now, many of you, some of you who have been sharing with us over the decades, I shared with some of you one of the interesting communications that I had with Ivan Van Sertima in Philadelphia when he came to Temple University in around 201. Yeah, in that area. Yeah, about 201. I have to double check. And I had talked to him, or his secretary came to talk to me. Actually, I was in the back because my sister was going to a class at Temple University with Malefia in so-called African studies. And Dr. Van Sertima was there. And I talked to him and I said, Ivan, I said, why don't you just tell these people that they're Moors? And so you're telling them that they were here before Columbus, but we were here a million years before them. Come on. And just tell them who they are. You already know that the black is a brand, it's a nom de guerre. And he said to me, this was Ivan's reply to me. He said, there's enough information in those books and other books, in spite of the objection and the pushback that I get from many of my own colleagues. He said, but if I said it straight out, they would deport me. And I said, they'll deport you, why? He says, that's when I found out he was from Honduras, right? But I said, you know that you're Moor and you're Moroccan, you're American. They're not. He said, but they have the jurisdictional power. And not that surprised me so much, to be honest with you. It kind of like a little bit disappointing, because I know that all these scholars know that these people are Moors, and why they would, or many of them would dig up so much history and data and then turn around and go right back to the Christian black codes and start branding our people black, knowing they're not black, and yet digging up a lot of data information showing that they're the actual people of the land. And these black code systems came in, in the 1600s and 1700s, or solidified in the 1800s, that they don't apply at all to Asiatic African people, and that it makes them not heritable. And it's interesting that so much passion is given in many lectures and in many writings concerning our organic people, and they insist, after all that knowledge, to call these people black, which they know is a nom de guerre, and in law makes them not heritable. But that's another issue. But again, it's part of the psychic attacks that are institutionalized and put in place in order to disconnect our people from the land. So let's go again, and let's go back to the foundational politics. Now, unfortunately, the European society has, quote unquote, educated the, quote unquote, Negroes to believe that their forefathers were brought from Africa on the east side to the Maghreb, or the west side, known as USA, as, quote unquote, Negro slaves. This is the biggest, quote unquote, white lie the world has ever known, and is the basic reason as to why and whenever truth appears among, quote unquote, blacks, the minority, write that down, will flee from its laden from that truth, and they will be laden with fear, laden with jealousy, laden with hatred, and laden with violence. For you see, the quote unquote blacks of North America believe that they have been told the truth all along, but they have not. So when truth appears, they react negatively toward it. As a matter of fact, they will not believe anything unless it comes out of the hybrid European man's mouth. The European man's education institutions or his formal publications. And this is all the result of the lack of knowledge of truth. Paradoxically, though, this great truth is the great body that will make them free. Again, referring to the Christian Bible, in which the quote unquote blacks believe. St. Paul says, prove all things, hold fast to that which is good. The following evidence shall be proof of the good toward which the Negroes, quote unquote, shall hold fast. The original ancient North, Central, and South America is known today as North, Central, and South America. So the original South Africa, North, Central Africa, North America is known today as North, Central, South America. And they comprise the cradle of humanity and civilization, and also the lands of the Moabite Moorish nation. And this is originally the land of our real foremothers and forefathers, and there is no traditional history which can go beyond this. Our Moorish ancestors descended from the dark-skinned Moabite nation, and we are ourselves are the direct descendants of the Moorish nation. And what our forefathers were, we are today without a doubt. And the fact remains that our inherited nationality is still Moorish and not Negro. At this point, you are advised to endeavor to govern your emotions with an open mind. The origin of the name Negro is the basic reason why, quote unquote, blacks have been both feared and hated so badly by the red, pale-skinned people of the European society of the USA. And we are aware of the fact that the category of astrology, global geography, and history of the Moorish nation will conflict with 9 out of every 10 persons of the USA, and especially those often referred to as, quote unquote, Negroes owing to their Christian education. And they have been too deeply instilled with emotional religious doctrines of dogma and distorted history written by prejudged and prejudiced hybrid European American educators during the past 100 years. And this group emotionally relies upon that which they have been taught to believe. Facts and testimony are not the foundation of their faith, except in very rare cases. And these people accept without question the beliefs of those among whom they are born and reared, and will disbelieve even the evidence of their senses rather than abandon the impractical, emotional, religious beliefs which have grown in them. Today, religious worshippers have proven to the entire world that they would rather resort to emotional human hatred and fight, suffer, and die over the name of the mythical God and religions than reasonably agree with simplified and applied truth. While reading these notes, you are advised to endeavor to be guided by common sound reasoning rather than by emotions which are the result of your traditional beliefs in the doctrines of religion. And we are aware of the fact that the illustration of the science of the 12 signs of the zodiac, the history of the Moabite Moorish nation, and the history of the Franciscan Anglo-Saxon nations are confusing to the reader owing to limited education of the majority of the masses. Nevertheless, the true history of the Moorish nation rose out of the corruption of the Moabite nation of this hemisphere over 1,371 years ago, calculated from 1951. Repeat. Nevertheless, the true history is that the Moorish nation rose out of the corruption of the Moabite nation of this hemisphere over 1,371 years ago, calculated from 1951. The Franciscan nations rose out of the corruption of the Moorish nation of this hemisphere in 1863, the era of the Union. The only true history during the past 1,300 years is that of the Moorish nation. The endemic garden, or the Edenic garden. In the year 49,000 AM, ancient Moabite, that's what AM really is, not your time in the morning, it's ancient Moabite. Yacub produced the red-skinned people with animalistic experimentation of 12 Moabite women and the Negro Yevara Arabo chimpanzee, known as your Anthropopithecus species, which is referred to in the Oxford Dictionary as the heterogeneous hybrid, also known as the Albion or the Anglo-man or the English man. Now you have a better understanding of what colonial operations actually really are, not what you thought. So this resulted in the name Negro. So the Negro is really Negro Yavera Arabo Chimpanzee Anthropopithecus. And so you go into your Oxford Dictionary and look up troglodyte nigger, which is also the scientific name for the Anthropopithecus. And it is the troglodyte nigger, which is used in the experiments in the Yucatan by Moabite scientists, predominantly women. And so when you're talking about Yacub, you're talking about the one who's given most of the credit. But keep in mind, the 12 scientists behind him were all women. And so when you comprehend a lot of what is known to really have taken place in North America with what they call slavery and the real slaveholders, the real truth is that about 62% of the most powerful slaveholders are all women. That's not told to you in history. And so this whole concept of women victimization, for the most part in North America, is not what you thought it was.
Are these melanated women or?
That's exactly correct. Exactly correct. But when you see them write in history, they'll talk about people like Anthony Johnson and something like that being one of your meanest or not nicest slaveholders. Most of it is put on males because of the patriarchy. Because remember, the Moorish nation is a patriarchy, but it came out of the corruption of the Moabite nation, which is a matriarchy. Same people. And this is why you will see in all of your Masonic orders, if you see in all your Masonic orders, including the Vatican, they'll have the Moabites in what you call statuette form in all of their deep chambers. Another tag they'll put in for the public will be called the Black Madonna. Now, and so that's the mother.
Interesting. There is a movie that I just saw, or a series. Matter of fact, it was on yesterday when you came, remember? And you were asking me what that was about. And it was the three women.
Oh, when I came in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those three, that turns out to be based on a true story, but it was three young men, and it was about cloning that was done in Mexico. And in 2018, these three men,
interesting.
Yeah, it was cloning had been done 34 years ago, and 33 years ago, and they found out they ran into each other, but they had been orchestrating their lives, and it was a social experiment. If they put one in a rich family, they put one in a poor family, and they put one in a sort of a mediocre, but they were cloned. They were identical, and one of the scientists was a female. She used her DNA to create them, and this was true. It's based on a true story, but they were three young men.
Now, isn't it interesting that
it's called triptych?
Isn't it interesting that when you talk in Mexico, you're talking the Yucatan?
Yeah.
Isn't it true and interesting that when you talk about ancient Budan of ancient Nubia, Eritrea, Sudan, Egypt, etc., and then you look at the Amexem to the south, you'll see the same culture, even in the stonework. Isn't it interesting that when you do a little bit of research, that which has been exposed, a lot has not been exposed, of the Grand Canyon, and you start seeing what they refer to as more ancient than ancient so-called Egyptian artifacts that have been not just buried, but also covered up. And then you begin to comprehend why in the 1800s, in this particularly, remember the 1863 era, they always refer to, particularly when you look at the Suf or the Red River or the Mississippi, etc., particularly in your Mid-South, in Mississippi area, then you go into Kentucky, Tennessee, they call it Lower Egypt. It's never been a secret, and yet people never put it together that you're simply talking about Egypt on both sides. And part of your all of your main secret societies always use Egypt as the key focal point of the culture, of Earth culture. Ancient Arabic order, of the mystic shrines, as an example, right in Washington, D.C. And many of you who know over the years, say 20, 25 years or more, because it's really more than that, let me see, for the last 30 years or so, many of you over the years used to go to Washington with ourselves when we used to take people every year to the George Washington Memorial Museum every year. And you would see all of the presidents, even of Mexico, with their Moorish fezzes on, with Allah embroidered in their crowns, not just in North America. And then you've seen all the praetors or the presidents with their Moorish fez. And all of the science and the culture was what? Berber culture or ancient, what they call ancient Egypt, and everything is referred to of the ancient Egyptian and Nubia, Moabite, Moorish culture. And yet publicly, they'd all pretend that the culture was established by hybrid European colonists who brought the culture here with them and then went back and got some of the Moorish slaves, branded them black. Yes, yeah, there you go. There you go. It's never been a secret, you know. And you already know that ain't his.
That's Truman.
Yeah, but the point that I'm making, Dr. G, you know how they say one of the easiest ways to hide things from certain people is to put it in a book and actually to put it in their faces.
In their faces, yeah.
You know what I mean? But even look at it, right? Just consider using just common sense, right? Here they got Moorish fezzes on, but they don't know nothing about who the Moors are. Isn't it interesting? And who would be their greatest defenders? Some of our own people who have embraced the Christian black codes, who insist that our people are black, Negros, knowing that the Negro, Yavera, Arebo, Anthropopithecus is the heterogeneous species referred to in Darwin's theory of the hybrid Europeans, what, evolving from the chimpanzee. You know how they always talk about that? They're implying the heterogeneous operations of the Yucatan in Mexico. And then even when you look at start doing a little bit of research into Germany, right? And the problems that they were having in Germany with the Pope's bench when they attacked Germany through the voucher system and was starving them and draining them via the voucher system. And then a man named Hitler was appointed to be the front man for others who were in the background to counter the Pope's bench, etc. And I guarantee you that most of the history about that man is incorrect too.
Just like a man named Trump.
It's incorrect. But I suggest you look into it and you'll start comprehending. For those of you who've traveled to Europe, Iberia, you'll see that it has been common, particularly in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, of them having different plays, you know, at theaters, with a common theme of go, quote unquote, and pay attention to what I'm getting ready to say because you can do a little research. I'm going back home to Argentina. Now, add this. Argentina is Patagonia. Now, add this. Patagonia is the last jumping place before Patmos after the Yacubian experiments. Also, with outposts on what is known today as, quote unquote, the Falkland Islands. Add this. Why was England doing war operations a decade or more ago at the Falkland Islands? Just something for you to think about so that you can start putting things together to understand the politics of the modern world. While the modern or contemporary people, real history has been hidden from you, those who know the truth of the Yacubian and Yucatan operations know the politics of the day, including the political, economic, operational, adopted systems of both war and economics. So when you're talking about Hammurabi's Code, think also Aunt Hagar of South America or the Yucatan. Also, when you think Aunt Hagar of the Yucatan, also think the grave site in Mecca in the Kaaba. In one corner, Aunt Hagar's grave. In another corner, the meteorite. It's another lesson for you. It's still tied to the Yucatan. Start putting things together, those of you who have scholarship, and start also doing a little research in, George Massey's books and others like that. And some of the translations they got from old text from Alexandria and Luxor when they burnt the libraries, because some of that information is still preserved. And you'll recognize that your concepts about the Maghreb or about the Americas is also extremely and violently incorrect. So in your secret societies, one of the things that is prominent in all of their learning, because they will be learning things in allegorical stories, signs and symbols, and it'll all turn back to Babylonia. Then you look at Hammurabi Bey's, then you look at Hammurabi Bey's codes, then you understand a lot of the things that hybrid Europeans are upset about even to today. Then you'll understand why a lot of hybrid Europeans mistreat the Moabite descendants, known as commonly today Black Negroes, all our tags, etc. Your concepts about many things will be corrected. Now, we could go a little bit more into Yacub and the Yucatan, but we want to say that to express this to you. Yucatan, center of civilization in the entire Western Hemisphere. Much of the history of the Phoenicia, Bantu, Mandinka tribes centered right there in ancient Moabite nation. And for those of you who know a lot of the Moorish history, now you know also about the white flag with the gold star, which is also our flag, but that's your mother's flag. It's another thing that's been held. This is why all women that go into Eastern Stars have a quote unquote white fez. I'm also just dropping some of those things to give you something to think about, so that you can think about while we did great things, some things we did were not so great. A lot of what we're experiencing is cause and effect, reciprocity, retribution, justice, balancing things out, learn to love instead of hate. Have a grand evening. Thank you for sharing with us here tonight at House of Reawakening Minds. And we want to tell you about our gathering for the vernal equinox. You know that we're Dr. G has been doing a lot of work with a lot of people, a lot of scholars from around the country, some outside this jurisdiction. And we want to do two things. We want to bring in the great gathering that we have traditionally every year here at the House of Reawakening Minds, and also celebrating the born day for Dr. G. And Dr. G, share us a little bit with the poster that we have. Can you screenshot the poster? Is it possible to screenshot the poster?
Oh, yeah.
But anyway.
Yes, here we go.
So I'll be there. Dr. Botanica will be there. Dr. David will be there. Mother Kai will be there. Logically, Dr. G.
And
Cynthia Martinez.
And possibly.
And possibly, yes.
And possibly Brother Rod Hayes.
our great brother, Rod Hayes. Hopefully he can make it through. And I heard about your pit bulls, brother. I'm impressed with them. Yeah, I love them.
So, and Sister Abundance.
And Sister Abundance, child. You want to talk about the best. I mean, this is all hands down, and it ain't just because she's our sister. Drop Squad Kitchen got the best veggie,
plant-based
food. That means vegan food around. Period.
Other restaurateurs come there to eat.
Oh, let me tell you. Yes. Other restaurateurs come there at the Drop Squad to eat. That is the truth. Her and her daughters got it locked down. They dropped that squad. That's for real. But anyway, any more details too? It's the 19th, the 17th to the 19th.
Yeah.
So that you got your whole weekend.
And the tickets are
Friday.
The tickets are $75 if you buy a single ticket, but they're $60 a ticket if you buy two at the same time. 60 notes rather. So you can get two tickets for $120 as opposed to one for $75. More people that just want to come on Friday night to the party is because it's Abundance Child and myself, Solar Return, and a meet and greet with Grand Sheik and others that'll be there for the Friday night. It's a celebration. And then on that Saturday, there'll be lectures and presentations. On Sunday, for those who can stay over till Sunday, we will have a holistic, our whole holistic thing will start with a nature walk to the Brandywine, the beautiful Brandywine. And then we start 10 and end at 2 on Sunday, but it's 3 days. We'd love to have you there. We've been the volunteers. We're going to recognize the volunteers who have come from all over the country to help us get the building remodeled. We're still doing last minute.
Yes,
we got volunteers out there right now working.
And it's sort of like with the vernal equinox. We'll be back at 602 Vandever, which we have been limited from the Unum Sanctum bio wars that have been taking place, that it closed everything down. But we'll be open up and we'll be glad to have you, and glad to. Oh, we're gonna have some of that Drop Squad Kitchen food too. So also, but mainly, the greater thing is not just the vernal equinox, which is nature's true new year here in the Maghreb, or in the Western Hemisphere at Midgard, because it's based on cosmology. That's the truth. And so they would call now Venus or Jupiter is in the eastern sky. And then you'll see the crescent moon there. And it'll look like the star comes right into the crest of the moon. And so it looked like Cosmo. And this is where you get the symbol of the crescent and the star in Rudan, and in Islam, and in Kupta, or what you would call Coptic philosophy, or what you call the first true Christians. And we're not talking Constantine Christians, there's two different things. So we're talking the original Asiatic, African, Kupta, etc., or Coptic. So that's what that symbol is. It's really the vernal equinox, particularly here in the Western Hemisphere.
The real New Year.
And the real New Year, and we call it springtime. So we used to use what you call palm trees. That's why you have the palm tree, symbolic. And then you have the bunny rabbit, symbolic fertility, the goddess of fertility. And so the abundance And then you have the grass, which means the sun rams the earth, and so this is why you have the ram or the lamb, ram, the symbolic. So you have the new birth, and you have abundance, and you have the dates, the fruit, date fruit, and stuff like that. And so they call it now the stars in the east, and in Berber culture they also call it Ishtar, Astarte, and then they say in the adopted culture they would call it the stars in the east or East Star or Easter, and in the Bible Esther. There you go.
Well, listen, if they want to come to the event, please, we're so excited. And we give our thanks out to Sister LaChris Robinson Jordan for our beautiful website. And you can go to the website. There is a link for this event and for other information. We want you to sign up. Let's talk about this before we go, Grant. Sheik. We are trying to do more in community where we can't talk freely here. On some social media platforms, we're not able to say all the things we would like to say. And so the reason why we have a registration is because we want to kind of keep tabs on who is coming into the community. We have built a website. Many thanks to Sister LaChris Robinson Jordan, who was on the show Tuesday. If you want to know about her, please look at Tuesday night. This past Tuesday week, she was a guest on Office Hours with Dr. G, talking about the importance of do you know who you are? The importance of genealogy. And then we talked about the website. But if you please go and look at that, because even that, I told you, Grand Sheik, I went to a website called FamilySearch.org. 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 They have a free site. You don't have to pay for these like Ancestry.coms and all that. Oh, yeah. This site is free. So I signed up for it, and then I realized it's run by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon. Yes. The Mormon, like they've said,
trying to claim our state.
Right. So the Mormon are the ones that have this website. Is free, and I'm telling you, I found people in my family. I didn't even know my great-grandmother's grandfather's names on my father's side. I just found out on Friday night looking up through this free website. So I'm throwing that out there because we do need to trace our we're good to trace your lineage, because now you get to see even in different places where they domiciled, and that's important when you start with the land.
This is what you recognize. Yeah, you gotta recognize when you're dealing with the Trail of Tears as an example, as a political construct. The political construct of the Trail of Tears was adopted into the military operations of the United States Corporation Company, which is why whenever they would draft the people into what they call the post-military army, like say for instance, if you were from the northeast of the Anasazi territory, they would ship you to the southwest,
away from
anywhere from direct orientation. If they drafted you from the south of the Powhatan Confederation area, they would shift you to the northwest or to the absolute mid-northwest, etc. Always to both disorient. And so you got to recognize even before those operations, and this is back to many of the Mandinka, Phoenicia, and Bantu tribes, we've always mixed. So you have to understand a lot of your what you call tribal attributes or names that they would call were political and not bloodline, because we're all brothers and sisters. That's the point that I'm making to Dr. J. Like a lot of people say, like most of my families on a Yamwea type thing, or they would say Cherokee. So you don't think that you're separated from the Mohawk, or the Mohican near the Great Lake, because we're all still families. Right. And I think one of the damaging things that has been practiced among our people is that they keep thinking that the different political, territorial, or political organization attributes or names make them different people. Wrong concept.
Right. Well, listen, we're not going to stay because we're going past our time. But again, please, if you have not, please sign up for the website. Please join. Please check it out for the information. If you want to come to the event, please, you can do that there. And also, we have, I'll be interviewing Brother Asir the Duketeers on Tuesday, but you have to register. I put the link in the chat a few times, but the link to register is also on the website, so you can get in for that Tuesday. If you can do that, and yeah, you're right. I don't respond to when you put 1,000 remarks in there. You definitely get my attention to ignore you, and I know you mean well, but please don't do that, y'all. Listen, y'all have a good night. We are going. We have a lot that we have to do, and we will have to resume tomorrow working on the building, and we hope to see a lot of you that we can see 17th, 18th, and 19th. Okay.
Yeah, and I want to give out a shout out to my sister Spirit Come Again.
Okay.
To my great niece Janira and her little babies, and I love my little babies.
That's right.
And her name is Callie.
Okay. So you got her.
Yeah. That's a short for Caliana.
All right. Okay.
So that's still Khalifa, but she has much of my late sister's spirit. So I'm going to go spoil her up a little bit.
All right, then we're going, and we do appreciate you all as always. And until Tuesday, hope to see y'all registered for Brother Asir. And that channel, like I said, is when you register because it's off of social media, and we can be unfiltered, and that's what you all asked. Look at it. That's what they asked for.
What are we even talking about? People need to comprehend that what injustice librorum prohibitorum and expurgatorius is still in operation. You see it today as shadow banning and censoring on the internet. Same thing. The operations have never ended. They just changed the name of the monster, of the beast.
Yes, and the sister who was asking about purchasing, trying to purchase the book, the end problem that you wrote and cannot get it. We're working very hard to get Grand Sheik's book.
Original script.
Original
republished. Because remember and this is for all of you, most of those texts which were published years ago were heavily abbreviated for sake of cost and expedient expedition of the text. Because a lot of my original manuscripts, and this is a short story, was a friend, actually a brother who worked for a big publishing company, approached me on 30th Street, 30th and Federal, and they offered me $250,000 as for an interim draft, etc. And they wanted me to go up Quakertown, Pennsylvania, and stay about 6 months to 7 months at one of the so-called hotels up in that area. And they wanted me to alter a lot of my scripts and play the black game, take everything Moorish out of it, etc. I rejected it. And this is why you've seen over the years, Dr. G, the desktop copy. That's the reason why you don't see it in hard copy. And it's also why you don't have all the original manuscript. And because of cost and the expediency of getting it out there, we did desktop copy. That's why you're seeing all of the literature in that format, because I wouldn't take the payoff. But we're planning to, when we republish them, we're going to publish them in with all of the other notes that were deliberately taken out to make them more or less publishable by both cost and expediency. So the ones that you've seen over the last, say, 20 years or so, it's not all of the script. And this is, again, some people over the years asked me, why was lesson book 1, 5, 14, because you already know about 14A. Why they were published out of sequence, that has much to do with it. It's for effect. So the sequence was not accidental. Anyway, have a grand evening.
All right, y'all. we'll see. I hope we'll see a lot of you on Tuesday.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine.